Hello guys, welcome to lesson number 34 in our series drawing tutorials for beginners, techniques for beginners. We've had a couple of lessons now on this converse trainer, and what we're going to start doing today is working in these darker shadowed areas again with our 2B pencil. If you can remember back to the last lesson, we started just getting some of these textures in and having a look at the grain of the material, just working those initial layers. So we're going to crack on with that. I've sharpened my pencils and I've freshened up my kneaded eraser, which is something that I always like to do. I've washed my hands. Make sure that you do wash your hands. I do know that some people have ruined pictures by, maybe applying hand creams and things like that and not realizing that it hadn't dried in, and then they smudge it on and you're sort of left with a bit of a stain in an area you can't remove graphite. So yeah, let's crack on with it. I'm just going to start working in this very shaded area near this shoelace. I need to get some value in here because although we know that this shoelace is a whitish colour, it's a sort of whitish grey, we know that from past experiences, I guess, but we do need to show that the contrast is between these two areas is really what's going to set the tone. Now I'm just looking here, I can notice in this very dark area there is a part of this lace that's coming through that I hadn't initially spotted, so I need to just mark that in now before I go too far with this. There's definitely something in there, and I don't want to miss that out. Again, it's one of those opportunities that I've spoken to you about before. When we are printing things off and we're not using thousands and thousands of pounds worth of printer to print these things off, we quite often lose some of the details in some of the darkest areas because obviously our printers are just working with a black ink and it's just getting different levels of black, which is obviously then coming out as a grey. And they don't always pick out the same details that we can do with our pencil, and that's why I always like to have my reference image to hand, but as well as that I like to have in front of me my iPad with a high resolution version of the reference image. Now if you've not got access to something like that, which I understand some people don't, they're expensive pieces of equipment, but anything, even if you've got your mobile phone in front of you or something like that, if you can get an image that has a lot of detail in there, something that you can't quite print out, then I really would recommend working from that. The pieces of paper are great for doing your grid and planning out and having just there as a sort of reference, but you don't always get that finer detail. So what I'm doing here is I'm finding what we call clean edges. Now a clean edge is a part of the drawing or the reference image where you've got two overlapping areas. So it could be a brick wall overlapping into the skyline. In this case we've got the edge of this trainer and the shoelace. So this is a clean edge. We want to show that this is going underneath the shoelace. So what we do when we find a clean edge, we go to the edge of the darkest value and then we just bring it out towards, in this case, the lighter area here, making sure that I'm not going into the shoelace at all here. And what that's going to do, it's going to give me differentiation between the trainer itself and the shoelace. Now I've got another one here that I'm just going to bring out a little bit, and I'm going to make sure I don't go too dark here because this is actually a shadow on the shoelace itself, so I don't want to go hugely dark there, certainly not as dark as this. And we have another one here, so we're going around the drawing in the initial stages and we're looking for the darkest areas and we're working in the darkest areas. Now if I was doing a portrait I would be doing this same process, but I'd probably be using my 2H pencil right now. The difference between working a portrait where we've got skin and something like a material-based trainer or maybe even hair is when we're working with the skin, we need a very smooth and very subtle contour, skin tones, things like that. So I like to build up a layer of the harder pencils and work from there. I can see that I've got one of those eyelets under here that I've not quite got in place just yet. So I'm just going to make sure I've got that. Yeah, so we would still be working in the darkest areas, but in our portraits on a skin tone, we would be working with the softer, the harder pencils before we go with the softer pencils. Working with materials, we do have a grain and a sort of less smooth texture, I guess, than we would have with a skin, unless we were doing somebody that had very textured skin, so maybe an older person. Something along those lines. So it's been really fantastic seeing some of your work over the last week or two over on the group. If this is the first time that you visited my channel, go and have a look at our Facebook group. It's called Tutorial Tuesdays Beginner to Pro, and ask to join that. We're quite a friendly group. We've had lots of new people joining us recently, which is fantastic. So come and join us there, and you can share your work, you can share your progress in the lessons. I've had a lot of sort of new people joining and starting out at lesson 1 and things like that, and it's great to see those initial lessons, those early lessons still being watched and people still learning from them. And I think even I've had quite a few really accomplished artists that have joined the group recently, and they're fantastic in different mediums other than pencil, but they've gone back and they've gone to some of those initial lessons, and I've had messages from them saying how much they've learned, and it's nice to go back to the basics sometimes. So you're never too good to learn something from going back to basics, and a lot of the methods that I'm sort of teaching here are maybe slightly different to what we're ordinarily used to. I don't teach blending in the sense of using blending stumps or tools to blend, so cotton buds and things like that. What we do is we create our values by just using the pencils themselves and layering them. It's a slightly longer process, but I think that what it does is it teaches us how to be very accurate with our tones and very accurate with our placement of light areas and things like that. And from there, you can then develop your own style. You know, if you can get these foundations in place, you can then go on. I've got nothing against people going and using blending stumps. I've tried them. They were the methods that I initially used. And, you know, if you want to save time, if you want to get through a drawing slightly quicker, then you're probably going to need to do that. And I would advocate going and trying these things. You know, I'm teaching you one method. This isn't the only method of drawing or producing art. And I find it quite interesting sometimes. I see on other art groups people arguing, you should do it this way or you should do it that way. And, you know, this is the only way you should do it and whatnot. And actually, you do it however you feel you want to do it, what works best for you. So as you can see here, what I've done is I've turned the piece of paper around because we laid some initial vertical lines down because we identified that there were some texture to this trainer, and because I've got those vertical lines in, what I now need to do in order to keep that texture in there, that underlying texture, is I need to go against the grain. Now, if I started shading vertically, what would happen is I would lose those textures that I built up. So I'm being very, very careful now to try and just keep hold of those as best as I can. Certainly in the lighter areas, so the back of this trainer here particularly. We're going to go much, much darker in these areas, so don't feel that we're not pushing the darks, but I'm going to build the darks up gradually. You know, we'll go into the 4B pencil and then we'll go into a 6B or a 7B. And if I feel necessary right towards the end, I will come in with my secret weapon, which I've discussed over various lessons now, which is my black pencil coloured pencil crayon. It's a Polychromos pencil, and I like to just pick out some of the darkest areas, and that it's the stage of the drawing that I I really like the most. It really brings the drawing to life. I feel that adding the highlights, just really taking those lighter areas out, but also then working the very darkest areas, just brings that initial or that final pop. And it's that stage that you can lose hours on, refining, going through the checklist of balancing the values and making sure that your highlights are highlighted and your whites of the eye in a portrait are absolutely sparkling by using your erasers. I have seen artists, and it's not something that I've tried yet, but again, it's something that I could maybe explore. I have seen artists using graphite, but then using these white pens. I think, I can't remember the names of them. They're sort of a white ink pen, Picasso or something like that. I'm sure you'll correct me down in the comments below or over in the group. I have actually got one, Posca, I think it is. Posca pens or something like that, and it's a white ink. And I saw a drawing that somebody did. I think it was, I don't know if somebody posted it on the tutorials group, but it was definitely on some of the other art groups that I'm currently a member of, and it was somebody done a fantastic drawing of I think it was a female face, and they had water all over them, and there was a lot of highlights in there, and they'd obviously used graphite and maybe even charcoal for the main bulk of the drawing, but then they were going over it towards the end with this white Posca pen, Pisca, something like that, and it was given a fantastic effect. Like I say, I've used those types of pens in my coloured work when I use the Copic markers and things like that, but I've never used them with graphite. So if any of you have, let me know down below, which brand are you using. I always find I can't find the ones that have got a fine enough tip. I can always find the ones locally that have very thick nibs on them, and it's very difficult to make them fine. Quite often they're used, I've seen them used quite a lot for pulling highlighted hairs out of people, those stray away hairs that are quite light and just catching the light. So just being careful to try and protect as best as I can the texture that I've got underneath, that underlying texture. I'm using a tapered stroke. For those of you that have been with me the whole time, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. For those of you that are new, I really would suggest going and having a look in the playlist section on my channel and having a look at lessons 1 through to 6, where I talk about the tapered stroke. What I'm basically doing with all of this graphite work is I'm laying down hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and thousands of lines where I'm pulling towards me. So in this video it may look as though I'm scribbling, but I'm not scribbling. All I'm doing is laying down lines and I'm pulling towards me, and I'm tapering them, which means that I'm making the start and the end thinner by lifting up. So gliding on and lifting up at the end, rather than having the same thickness of line the whole way through. I'm using a layering technique. I'm going up and down the layers, and this again is our initial layer. This is only our first layer of 2B. I will work through it, maybe up into a 7B in some of the areas. And what happens is you get a lovely coverage, and I've seen some people using these types of techniques and producing some fantastic work where it looks almost as though they've just lightly dropped powder onto the paper. So subtle that the changes of value from dark to light are so subtle in some areas that it looks as though somebody just sprinkled down some sort of powder or a chalk powder or a graphite powder. what we're doing the whole time we're working this way and layering is we're protecting the tooth of the paper. We're not gouging the paper. And what that allows us to do right at the end is it allows us to take away value in these highlighted areas. So specifically in this area, in this heel here, we're going to have a lot of fun with that later on. As long as I don't lay down the graphite too dark and press on too hard, which has taken me years to perfect the art of not pressing on too hard. I've got a pretty good gauge of how much pressure I'm putting on. But it allows us then to take out some very subtle highlights at the end. I'm just going to work this black stripe that comes around the bottom, and this is definitely an area that we're going to use our Polychromos coloured pencil, because this is black. This is absolutely black, and it's one of the darkest areas on the drawing, and it's one area that I want to absolutely nail the contrast in. And I'm just going to leave a little bit of it out there because it's highlighted, so I'm going to leave a little bit of it out, and then as we work through the drawing, we're going to darken up the areas around it. Some of the loose graphite that we're going to brush in will go into that area, and it will allow me to maintain a slight highlight in there, which might sound silly that we're talking about that now because it's so subtle. But if I can find enough of those subtle opportunities throughout the drawing to really have a go at and really understand and bring out, it takes my drawing from one that people go, yeah, that's a nice drawing, you know, you've got a bit of talent there, to one that they go, wow, you know, from a distance that looks real. And it's those attentions to details that I would say I've learned the most about in the last couple of years. I can remember initially rushing and, you know, taking a rubber to the drawing at the end and bringing your highlights out, you know, in a sort of rushed fashion, rather than building the highlights up throughout the drawing, which is what we're doing in that corner there. Just takes your drawing to a completely another level. I've had some brilliant reference images sent in from you guys. I did put a post up there a while ago now about sending me some of your own reference images for future lessons and projects. So thank you so much for those. I'm looking through them and we will definitely be having a go at them. I think the general consensus from most people in the group is they like drawing animals and things. So we'll certainly add a few of those in. There's been some brilliant images on there. If any of you are photographers or you know photographers and, you know, they're willing to let us use some of their images to use in class, then by all means send them over, and obviously we'll give the photographer credit, which is something that we need to do whenever we're using reference images. The reference images I use are often from Pixabay, and quite often you don't get a name of the photographer. Sometimes you do, but Pixabay is a great library of reference images. You know, you've got all manner of reference images and they're all very high resolution. I'm guessing that in order to upload onto Pixabay you have to have a minimum resolution, so I'm finding the images on there are fantastic quality, and again you can print them off, but then you can have that image up on your iPad in front of you so that you can get those subtle details in there. Okay, I'm going to use my brush now. So I use a very soft, I've had this 3 years, it's a 2-inch brush, a makeup brush will do, and I use this when I'm doing work with material and hair. So what I'm doing is I'm brushing some of this graphite, and the pencils I use are called Caran D'ache grafwood pencils. They're quite a soft lead. So there is a lot of excess graphite that I can now start to get, particularly into some of those lighter areas, but it's just going to give me a slightly better coverage. Now you don't need to brush too much. It's not something that we have to come to a lot, but it is something that I like to get in. I'm just going to come in between these stitches now. I want to leave a little bit of a gap between the values because we've got some white stitches in there, and I want to just get the initial layout of where they're going to go, and then we can go to town with those as we start developing the drawing. You know, what you could almost say is we're still kind of in the planning stage. What we're doing is we're getting our core shadows, the darkest areas in. We're trying to leave the lighter areas alone. I've got a subtle bend in that I want to try and recreate, so I'm just going to bend that value slightly round. And again, it's another one of those opportunities. You know, our eyes are trained to pick up on things that aren't authentic. Our brains are fantastic tools at picking out things that don't look right, at frauds, at imitations, at something masquerading as something else. So we are going to try and copy this as closely as possible. If it's on the reference image, it needs to be on our drawing. Plain and simple. I hope you guys are enjoying these videos. If you are doing, I'd really appreciate a like and a subscribe to the channel. The channel's growing really well. More and more people are starting to find these tutorials. The Facebook group's growing really well. Everybody's so supportive on there, so thank you so much for keeping our group. It's one of the best art groups that I'm part of, if not the best. And I know I would say that because obviously I did put it together a few months ago, but you know, honestly, it's a group I haven't seen anybody criticizing. You know, constructive criticism is absolutely fine, and we all need that, particularly when we're starting out. It's how we learn, it's how we improve. But I haven't seen any of this, you know, what you see in other art groups where people are just slating each other and, you know, making fun of people's art and whatnot. So thank you so much for that, guys. It does mean a lot to me, and it's turning into an environment now that people are wanting to become part of. And you know, I've had a few people join and message me saying, you know, I'd heard about this group on Facebook that seems to be quite grown up and based around praise and sharing their work. And you know, people are sharing their own work, which is fantastic, but you know, the majority of the work that's going on there is people taking part in the lessons and getting a lot from the lessons. And it's nice to see people offering advice that are a little bit further along in their journey, you know, whether they started as a beginner with the lessons or they were already reasonably accomplished artists. You know, it's offering that advice. And it is nice to wake up in the morning and see 50 new posts with, you know, lots of likes on, and people starting to come out of their shells. And you know, I've had a lot of people that have been saying, you know, I've been watching the videos and I've been doing my drawings, but I've not posted anything, but now I think I'm ready to post something. And it might be just a sphere that they've done or one of the barrels from the early exercises, but they're just building the confidence up now that they're seeing that people are posting work on there and they're not getting bombarded with outlandish insults and things like that. So once again, thank you so much. It's a lovely group to be a part of, and I'm so glad that I did start it up. And you know, I kick myself most days now for thinking, why didn't I do this a long time ago? But you know, everything happens at the right time and for a reason. I'm a firm believer of that. But this idea of mine to create this type of group based around a series of lessons that I'm trying to teach you everything that I know, and sharing with you some of the pitfalls that I've had and fallen into and things to avoid. And you know, so you don't go out and buy every pencil under the sun. You know, I've done that. I've gone and spent hundreds of pounds on equipment, and half of it, more than half, 90% of it, I never use anymore. Because I found what works the best for me, and what you do and you don't need. I was, again, one of those, and I'm sure some of you are probably at that stage. It's the stage of, actually, if I go and buy the best pencils, the most expensive pencils, I'm going to be able to blend better, or I'm going to be able to get darks darker and things like that. And actually, that's not true. You can create some wonderful work with the cheapest of supplies if you know what you're doing with them. My art teacher always used to say things like that. You know, it's not what pencil you're using or type of paint. It's how you're applying it. You know, I've seen some fantastic artists on YouTube and they make these types of videos of, you know, using $1 Crayola pencils to try and create a masterpiece. And because they've got the skills, because they understand how light works and how value changes need to be smooth and gradations of light and things like that, you know, they can use a $1 or £1 set of Crayola colouring pencils and create something fantastic. Could they make it look better with a $1,000 set of Prismacolor luminants? Or if that, no, they're not the Prismacolor luminants, are they? They're I think they're Caran D'ache luminants, but they're a very expensive pencil to use. Yes, they probably could make it look better if they went down that street, but it's their skills that they have that allow them to produce something wonderful. So don't fall into that trap. And again, it's like I say, it's something that I'm passionate about. I don't want you going out, and you know, art is not an expensive hobby. I know that there are a lot of people out there that, you know, they don't have a lot of money, and for them spending £20 on some paper and things like that is a lot. But, you know, think about some of the hobbies that people have. I mean, if you take skiing, for example, or golf, you know, these things are expensive hobbies. You know, it takes hundreds and hundreds of pounds and thousands of dollars to get into something like that. You know, for a few dollars we can get some paper and we can have some pens or pencils and we can start creating wonderful pieces of work that we can be proud of. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get some initial value into this star. Now the temptation here, because this is sort of black, would be just to bear straight down with the pencil and go as dark as I can. But I'm not doing that because I know I'm going to build the value up. And I know I always have, and I resist the temptation, I always have that black polychromos pencil crayon or coloured pencil in my arsenal. So if I haven't brought the value up enough, I know I've always got that, and I know that I'm going to use that anyway, because that is black in there, and the same as those stripes around the soles of these trainers. So I know I'm going to use that anyway, but I'm resisting that temptation. Part of my brain's going, go on, push the pencil, push it harder, make it go dark. But what that does is it damages the tooth of the paper. It grinds the graphite down into the tooth of the paper, and it doesn't allow me to erase. It doesn't allow me to take any subtle highlights out of there. I don't know if there are any in there. I've not studied it enough, but I'm guessing that there will be. It's not going to be a flat colour. Anything that we have flat, and what I mean by flat is all the same tone, makes it look as though it's not part of a realistic drawing or a realistic picture. So just getting some of that initial value in there. Now it's important to see that that is darker than this, and at the moment we're at a very similar level, and the reason for that is I've used 2B again. So I've only used 2B in this area. I've only used 2B so far in my darker areas on the canvas. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come in with my 4B, and I'm going to bring the value of this up slightly, so that I'm building the contrast up. I'm getting a good understanding of what this drawing is going to look like. And you surprise yourself sometimes that you can actually finish without realising you're about to finish. You just go, actually, I'm happy with this now. This is dark enough in this area. This is light enough in this area. I'm done. I was saying before in one of the videos recently that there's no end of drawings that when I sit down and start the session of drawing, I have no understanding and idea that I'm going to finish it in that 2-hour session or 1-hour session. I just sit down and start drawing and building the values up, and then I go, actually, I think I'm done with this. So just using this 4B, just layering it on very gently, using the tapered stroke, And you can now start to see that this is now darker than the rest of the trainer, and I want that. So I'm pretty happy with that there. I'm just going to highlight, or darken should I say, this band, because again this is as dark, if not darker slightly, than the star. So just applying some of this 4B, just so that I'm not having a flat drawing that I'm looking at. So we're sort of getting towards the end of where I want to be with today's session. I do like to try and keep these videos down to about half an hour. And we are just around about that point now. So continue adding some of the value into some of the darker areas and trying to maintain that texture in certainly in the highlighted area. I will continue to do that. Make sure that you're posting your progress in the group, and don't be shy, you know. Get your name out there and ask for advice when you can, and give advice when you want to, or vice versa. Ask for advice when you want to, and give advice when you can. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how this starts to develop. I'm starting to get a good... We're at that stage now in our drawing where it doesn't really look that good, but we're only just around the corner from this going bow. You know, it's really going to start to pop. We are almost there, and I like that stage in a drawing. It goes from being... I've had some drawings that look absolutely horrendous at this sort of stage, and you're thinking, wow, this does not look like the person, or it doesn't resemble or look shiny enough, or the hair looks terrible. And then within another half an hour it's totally transformed. So we are sort of reaching that point now, having faith in the process, looking to see what's really there, not what we think's there, and trying to accurately replicate that with our pencils. So I'm going to leave you at that, guys and girls. Thank you so much for your continued support. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel, and share and do whatever you can to get these videos out there, because I do firmly believe now that we are starting to help quite a lot of people, whether that's on a new direction for their art, or getting the confidence to maybe start showing their art, or at the beginning of a completely new adventure for some people. So, you know, get it out there as best as we can. Let's start this drawing revolution and have people confident and maybe having a career at drawing. That would be fantastic to know that we've helped somebody do that. So I'm going to leave you with that, guys. Thank you so much again for watching the video, and I will see you on the next one. Thanks a lot. Hit subscribe, smack the notifications button, follow me on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter.